Christine, for joining us. You were diagnosed 28 years, almost to the month, after me. And I'm encouraged by the fact that things have improved. And everyone will have already heard my diagnosis story. So thank you for sharing yours. What was
Sure.
the event that precipitated your CRPS?
Mine is kind of a long series of events, but to make the longest story short,
Mm-hmm.
I had six back surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
One of the surgeries left me with foot drop because they damaged L5 S1 nerve root 10 years
Okay.
ago.
How many?
So that was a total nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And over the past 10 years, having foot drop, it broke down my ankle. I had a couple of stress fractures during those years.
Mm-hmm.
And right from the beginning of having a damaged nerve and partially paralyzed foot, I thought about having a tendon transfer, but I was too afraid to.
Mm-hmm.
So I waited and I continued working as a nurse. And just during that time, things got worse and worse. I had more and more pain in my ankle and swelling, and I had less and less of an ability to tolerate walking, standing, so much so that it was affecting my work. It was affecting my ability to do things I like. Um, it just kind of took everything away from me. Some things immediately and other things over time. So I went and had an ankle surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did what I called two interviews of doctors before I met my ankle surgeon. I didn't like the first two I talked to. Um, so the surgeon that I chose, he's excellent. He has, awards, and a lot of people in the local community know him. So he did a ankle fusion because I'm really picky. I asked him to explain to me why he was suggesting that and to show me on my x-rays and MRI where the problems were.
Right.
And this is where the other two doctors failed. They, weren't explaining why I was having pain and how they could fix it and how something like a tendon transfer could fix it. They weren't making much sense. This doctor showed me and drew on a picture and said, here's the way these bones are lined up in your foot, but here's the way they're supposed to be lined up. And
Right.
right here is where the arthritis is. And so he said, just the lack of opposing force. I mean, if you move your hand like this, you've got tendons pulling this way and
Right.
tendons pulling that way. Well, if you don't have both of those and you're missing one entire muscle on a limb, um, the stress on that joint, especially an ankle joint, is going to get messed up. And I guess I didn't really fully understand that, and maybe I might have been better off if I had gotten a tendon transfer like 9 years ago or something. I don't know, but I did have some neuropathy. I mainly felt a little numbness on the side of my big toe and
Mm-hmm.
some tingling occasionally. So I had been off and on gabapentin for the past 10 years because
Mm-hmm.
of that. And it wasn't what I would call painful, like the neuropathy, the tingling and stuff. It was just a weird sensation occasionally. And
Right.
and the numbness wasn't like the numbness that you have in CRPS at all.
Right.
It's the numbness that I have now is it hurts.
Yeah.
So um So yeah, I went ahead and had the surgery, which it ended up needing to be a fusion of two bones where
Mhm.
they put in two screws and a tendon transfer, but he also had to do an Achilles tendon release.
Okay.
So
Because your
I
foot had been in
explained,
that position for so long, that
Yeah.
they kind of tightened up.
They couldn't, yeah, it was so tight on the back where the Achilles tendon was, because you have to think, if you're not bearing weight on your foot, and I'm sleeping, so my foot falls.
Right,
And so that tendon on the back just tightened and tightened
right.
and tightened. So
Mhm.
I said to him, can you explain to me exactly how you're going to loosen that? Because that's kind of scary. And he drew a picture of just two lines. Here's your
Mhm.
tendon. And he said, I make a tiny little cut here and a tiny little cut here and a tiny little cut here, and it elongates a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm
they
like,
do that
okay,
a lot in
yeah,
kids who have like cerebral palsy or something else.
yeah, mm-hmm,
A fairly
yeah.
common surgery.
So everything made sense to me, and I felt really comfortable going into the surgery. The plan was to be off work for about 6 weeks, month and a half or so. That's um, usually pretty reasonable, considering that my job isn't terribly physically demanding at the moment.
Right.
And I would have been allowed back to work wearing a boot if I needed to,
Mm-hmm.
using a cane if I needed to, even having a knee scooter on the floor would have been fine.
Right.
So I went ahead and had the surgery, and my doctor did a great job.
And this was in
Um,
what month and what year?
it March 12th, 2024.
Okay. And
So
your first symptoms that let you know something was not right were what?
April 7th, April 7th, 2024.
And what were they?
Um, I had been in splints for a couple of weeks, and then had gone back and they had put on a cast. I had been
Mm-hmm.
in a cast for 10 days. Um, it was a Sunday night, and I was feeling my leg swelling again inside
Okay.
the cast,
Yeah.
and it felt like it was on fire. And I started to get really, really panicked. And I told my boyfriend, something's wrong, something's wrong. I don't know. I mean, is it infected? Do I have compartment syndrome? What's happening? Why do I feel like it's swelling inside the cast?
Because it was.
And yeah, um, and that was in my nurse brain. It just wasn't making any sense, and so I knew I had to do something. And I remember him being like, "Are you sure? Like what?" And so he was kind of like in a state of disbelief for a few minutes, but I was not, because I called my surgeon and his physician's assistant who knew me. He was there for my surgery. He was there for some of my appointments. Um, he said, go right to the emergency room. And even for the first 3 weeks, I remember him sending me home on Percocet 5 325s.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to get along with that, but very shortly I was like,
Okay.
this isn't enough. So this is so painful. This is more painful than all these back surgeries I've had, and other surgeries. And I'm going, it wasn't right from the start. And looking back on some things pictures I took and things I said and texts that I said, like, this isn't, like, I'm really, really in a lot of pain. My doctor had listened to me and moved me onto Percocet 10 325s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he had upped my pain medicine. And when I went to the emergency room, that doctor was extremely rude. Um, didn't really believe me. And he was being like frustrated and angry with me.
Right.
um he was like, well, why didn't your doctor call and tell me you were coming? And I'm going,
This is an
uh
emergency room.
right, okay. So he went to call and got a hold of them, and they told him the same thing: take the cast off,
Right.
treat her pain, and we're going to see her in the morning.
Right.
So he, when he walked away from my little curtain space, I I waited a few moments until I thought he was out of earshot, and I said quietly to my boyfriend, I said, I don't think he's listening to me. And he yelled from across the ward and said, I just need to know how to get you out of here.
I can tell you that everybody that I know with CRPS avoids emergency rooms like the plague. Of course, you didn't know
Yeah,
that's what you had at that point.
no, no. And that I'm asking that doctor, like, is this compartment syndrome? Is this infected? And he's
Right.
like, he had zero answers,
Yeah.
zero. They just gave me, some stupid discharge paperwork, and they gave me 10 milligram oxycodone. And
But
I'm
they
like,
did cut the cast off.
they did. They
Yeah.
took off the cast. I was allowed to bring an old walking boot that I already had.
Hmm.
So, just looking at it, I did not see, I mean, it was red, it was swollen. And I've got this doctor saying, no, you're fine. It's not infected or compartment syndrome. And I'm going, well, what is it?
Right.
So they just sent me home in a flurry of concern and worry. And I presented myself to my surgeon the very next morning, and they took x-rays immediately. And when you look at those x-rays, you can see the top of my foot is like bulging and
Hmm.
swollen. That's how swollen it was. Um, and I'm going, this is just not normal. I mean, the surgery wasn't even down on the top of the surface of my
Right.
foot like that. Like, it was around my ankle. This is not the area where the surgery was done, but I have this big bulging pocket of edema on the top of my foot, and my toes look like sausages, and um my leg all the way up to the right below my knee. Like, the entire area where the cast had been
Yeah.
was just on fire. I felt like people were holding a blowtorch to it, and I felt these weird prickling
Hmm.
sensations. I told them it feels like someone is tattooing me, only even worse,
Right.
and even tattooing me on the bottom of my foot, and it's super hot. It's
Other
red.
than
It's
the x-ray, did your surgeon do any other tests to rule out something else?
no. He, after listening to me, said, I think you have complex regional pain syndrome,
Right.
and I'm going to refer you to a doctor that can do a spinal injection.
Okay.
And I said, what is that? And I'm a nurse, and I
Right.
had never been taught about it. I've never heard of it. I've
Me
never seen a
either.
patient with it on their diagnosis list.
Yeah.
So I was a little confused, and he actually wrote it down on a piece of paper.
Right.
I have that piece of paper. I took a picture of it since then, because that was the first moment that I even heard of CRPS.
Yeah. And when
And
he told you that, how did you feel at that point?
um I didn't panic because I had no clue what it was. I had no clue that it was incurable.
And he
Um,
didn't give you any more than just that's what the diagnosis is. He didn't talk to you about prognosis or anything.
no, no. He said basically that he thought I had it, and he said if the shot works, then then we know that you have it.
Which is false,
Um,
by the way.
yeah. So, but I'm
At
lucky that
least
he
he
did
could
recognize it.
recognize it.
Yeah. So, he gave me a referral, and he said, you need to start physical therapy. You're not in the cast. We need to get your leg moving. We don't want you staying in the boot all the time. We want you to move your
Right.
ankle. We don't want you to be stationary. So he put me on the schedule for that immediately. Um, and he sent me off to a local doctor who does some pain injections and treats some pain. Um, that doctor, who I saw in very short order afterwards, he basically said, I don't do the spinal injections that you need. You need a sympathetic nerve block. And by that point, I had already started investigating what CRPS was. So I was getting a vague idea at
Mm-hmm.
that point. Things didn't fully hit me immediately, um, especially since my surgeon said a spinal injection. I'm like, oh yeah, I've had six back surgeries. Like, yeah, I've had back injection before. Big deal, right?
Right.
Yeah, sure. I'll get a spinal injection. It'll fix it. We'll be fine. Move on, right? No. It wasn't until I got home and started learning things very quickly over the several days. Um, and that's when I really started to freak out. Um, so I dove in head first into the abyss of CRPS,
Oh,
all while having these terrible symptoms that were getting worse and worse very quickly.
yes.
And found a lot of Facebook groups, found a lot of doctors talking about it on YouTube, doing seminars and speeches. And, um, I mean, I have to credit really the Facebook groups that I joined for pointing me in all the right directions because honest to God, it's the patients who know the most.
Yeah. Well,
They,
yeah, because we live with it every day.
uh-huh, they know where to point you. They've got every group has documents that they have saved there,
Yeah.
and that's I had to go on the hunt for my own pain doctor. I saw another pain doctor in Flint, and all he wanted to offer me was a spinal cord stimulator and said that he refused to even prescribe medication at
Yeah.
all. He said, doctors are getting arrested and thrown in jail. I'm not going to risk my license. So,
Right.
you know, and he
Really,
didn't.
my experience and the experience of many others is that pain medication doesn't really help because it's nerve pain and
Right,
they're not
exactly.
designed for nerve pain. So
So,
from
yeah.
that standpoint, you were probably better off.
Well, at that point, I was still taking Percocet and I was still having like post-surgical pain.
Right, of course.
So it was helping in some aspects and in some aspects it wasn't. So it took me a while to kind of differentiate those things in my mind.
Hmm.
And of course, I was doing a lot of research on my own. So after seeing two pain doctors unsuccessfully, they finally got me scheduled through the hospital I had the surgery at with an anesthesiologist to get a sympathetic nerve block. But I was already on the hunt on my own. I'm just not one to just listen to whoever when they send me to whoever for
Right.
whatever reason. I'm gonna look around to see what's the deal. And I very, very quickly joined the ketamine group on Facebook
Hmm.
and I started learning a lot as much as I could, as fast as I could. It was even hard for me to understand that the difference in dosages and treatment plans between mental health and
Yes.
pain. I didn't get that at first, and I thought it would be easy. And I looked and I found a doctor in Michigan that accepts my insurance.
Hmm.
That is less than an hour from me, who gives ketamine. And I thought, oh, problem solved. I could get in there right away and get this under control. So I made an appointment with that doctor. So I'm still waiting for the spinal shot from this other doctor at the hospital. I had to go see his nurse practitioner. She was very cold. There was no big review of everything that's going on. There was no bedside manner, nothing. She was just cold.
Right.
So I let that appointment be and went and saw Dr. Rosenberg and he explained, that his preference to verify the CRPS is to do two shots in a row in the same week. And I was told like by insurance and by my doctors that They pretty much are like, insurance is pretty much going to want my diagnosis verified, and they want all three things. They want proof that the shots worked for any length of time, so I had to keep a pain diary.
Mhm.
They wanted my doctors to submit their Budapest criteria
Right.
and McGill pain scale. Um, Even then, insurance technically doesn't pay for ketamine.
Right.
And so Dr. Rosenberg, the first day I saw him, spent more than 2 hours talking to me, and
That's
I absolutely love him. But and I trust him, but I found out that day that yes, I could get a ketamine infusion, but he can only offer it like one dose, maybe once a month. So
right.
I already knew about the loading doses, and that was absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I thought I tried to reason with myself in my mind, like, I'll just get in as fast as I can, and maybe one dose will help me tremendously because it was diagnosed so early.
Right.
Um, and meanwhile, I'm just kind of panicking, still gathering information and talking to people and networking. And I had those two spinal injections in the same week, Monday and Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And it it's like it relieved some of the sensations and the pain. I could tell a difference, but at the same time, it aggravated a whole bunch of other stuff.
The thing
And
is,
then,
that dates back to like the 1990s when they called it reflex sympathetic dystrophy because they thought it was an illness within the sympathetic nervous system, but we now know it's the central nervous system. So to base a diagnosis on that test really isn't accurate. And I know the insurance companies say, hey,
yep,
well, they're not up to date. And
they're
I'm going to stop you
lagging.
there because we're just going to talk about diagnosis and not treatment.
Okay.
And we will follow back with you when you get back from having your ketamine.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're